Welcome back to Combat Mission Basics, where we haven't blown anything up for a while, so let's change that. In this one we're going to be looking at close air support, the different types of aircraft and weapons, how they operate in combat mission, how to call them in, and how Red Thunder is completely different. One of the most important things to bear in mind with the way Combat Mission handles air support is that you're not going to actually see any aircraft. Combat mission maps are very small from the perspective of even relatively slow World War II fighter bombers. When aircraft are orbiting the battle before being directed onto their targets, they can be kilometers away. When they finally make their attack runs, they're only over the physically rendered map for a few seconds at most, and can easily be at such an altitude that the player would never see them unless they were looking up at exactly the right moment. And this of course is assuming that they would actually overfly the battlefield at all. Modern aircraft and attack helicopters using standoff weapons have no reason to come anywhere near it. So with the amount of time anybody might see an aircraft in a combat mission game being somewhere between 0 and completely negligible, it doesn't make a lot of sense for Battlefront to invest time, money and effort in creating 3D models for all of the aircraft in the games and coming up with a system to animate them doing aircraft things. The positions of aircraft are plotted. These are the points in the game environment that their weapons are fired from and the points that anti-aircraft units will target, but they're not visually modelled, and the only way to tell that they're about before things start blowing up is the audio. The other byproduct of the way Combat Mission handles aircraft is that the actual platform feels a lot less important than its payload. Classic aircraft design characteristics like top speed, rate of climb, turn speed and the like are somewhat irrelevant. From our perspective, it's a flying weapons platform, and this is pretty much how air support options are presented in the Force Selector. The options vary a little between time periods, and while the descriptions give you a general and relative idea of what the options are armed with, a light air support element is carrying less payload than a heavy one, it is worth doing a test purchase or familiarising yourself with the options in the editor before you commit to anything, so that you know exactly what they're armed with and how those weapons work. That's a quick primer on a couple of air support's key features. How do you actually call them in combat mission? How do you call for air support? The process is very simple and very similar to calling in artillery. First, we need an air support asset, for example an AH-64 Apache, and then we need a unit capable of calling it in. Not all units can call for air support, depending on doctrine, and some specially trained units, such as JTACs, air controllers, and sometimes forward observers, can do it much faster than others. For this demonstration, we've got a JTAC. To call a strike, we simply select our JTAC team, and click on the little close air support icon next to the artillery icon, which is going to be lit up if we have air support options. Clicking on that pops up a menu with all the options we have available. When we click our Apache, the mission parameters menu pops up in the center of the UI, which also shows what ammunition it has available. To get the mission going, we have to choose what we want the asset to do: engage a point target or engage an area target. Point targets are pretty self-explanatory. We can click on a specific unit, building, bridge or area of ground we want the asset to attack. Area targets are a little more complex. If we select that, we can draw a circle on the map. The asset will come in and try to find and attack targets in that circular area. For this demo, we've got 3 T-62s out on the range. We want the Apache to engage them all, so let's give it a great big area target. With the target set, we can move on to the next phase of the call-in, whether we want a light, medium or heavy mission. This part is about giving the asset guidance on what weapons we want it to use. If we check the Apache's unit card, we can see it's carrying a mixed loadout: a 30mm cannon, 70mm rockets and Hellfire anti-tank guided missiles. These broadly translate into light, medium and heavy options, so if we went for a light mission, for example, the Apache would come in with a preference for using the cannon. The TAC AI of the asset has the last word though. Ultimately, it will try and select the best weapon for the job, regardless of the guidance in the mission. So in our case, the Apache is probably going to engage the T-62s with its Hellfires no matter what we tell it to do, but we want to make sure it does, so let's set it to heavy. After that, we get a choice of calling the mission in immediately or after a 5, 10 or 15 minute delay. Checking the delivery time, we can already see it's going to take 5 minutes to call the mission, and we want it to be as fast as possible, so let's go for immediate. All the details for the mission are now listed on the left, and we have a final chance to confirm or cancel. If we click confirm, our JTAC will get on the radio to call the Apache when we start the turn. We can check to see it's working by opening the support tab again. The Apache is now receiving the mission. If we keep checking, after a couple of minutes the Apache has switched to preparing, so the mission has been set up, the crew are approaching the battlefield and the JTAC is orienting them to the situation on the ground. The next stage is the actual attack. The Apache's icon switches to attacking and it starts searching for targets, which it then engages. These do not need to be targets that the calling unit can see. In our case, there is a T-62 hiding behind a building that the JTAC does not have line of sight to. The Apache can see it though and engages it with a Hellfire. After making an attack run, the asset will switch to coming around. It's now repositioning for another attack, and once it's ready it will switch back to attacking and come in again, repeating this cycle until it either runs out of targets, ammunition, or otherwise thinks it's time to go. If it's out of ammunition, then the asset will switch to landed, meaning it's returning to base and can't be called again. If it's still in the fight, then it can be used for future missions. A big feature of close air support in combat mission is that it has a lot of independence. The TAC AI for the asset handles a lot of the minor details, and sometimes these can be important. Assets can miss the target they're aiming at, they can re-attack previously engaged targets whether they've been destroyed or not, and they can, and will, attack friendly troops by accident, especially if they're in or close to their engagement areas. Finally, unlike artillery assets, air support can be engaged by air defense assets. AA guns and surface-to-air missiles will attempt to shoot down incoming enemy aircraft. If they are successful, the asset will be marked knocked out and obviously be unavailable. It will also crash with a great big explosion, sometimes on the map. AA fire and SAMs also function as a significant deterrent to enemy aircraft. Air assets on attack runs may be forced to evade if they think it's too dangerous, in which case they cancel their current attack and either come round for another go or give up entirely. Aircraft will not engage each other, they can only be shot down or deterred by ground-based units. One major exception to this whole system is the way close air support is handled in combat mission Red Thunder. Here, the player does not have any control over air assets at all. If they are present during a battle, they start off in an en route state. When they arrive over the battlefield, they choose their own targets entirely independently and go through the same attack coming around cycle until they feel the need to leave. The engine manual seems to indicate that that's how it should work across all the World War II titles, but it certainly only works this way in Red Thunder. Battle for Normandy, Fortress Italy and Final Blitzkrieg used the method detailed earlier. So that's a quick, shallow guide to the mechanics of close air support in combat mission. Hope you all found that interesting and helpful. I'll catch you in the next video.